So recently I've taken a break from my main project Pusherworm, and it's not from being bored of working on it, it's just that I've been having a lot of fun participating in some game jams lately. By working on more game jam games, I've been developing some new skills and getting to know other game developers and learning about their projects, so it's been a super rewarding experience. One of those developers, Xanderjam, was hosting their own jam. As a fan of his YouTube channel where he gives entertaining playthroughs of itch.io games and shares his own devlogs on his own game, Orion's Throne, I wanted to throw in my support and join in on the jam. The theme was evolution. I thought this was a great theme, but also a bit of a scary one. Evolution in a game seems like something that you could really easily overscope on, and given we had only 6 days to make it, there was every chance I could begin to make something and not have enough time to finish it. While brainstorming some possible ideas, I started thinking about the process of making my last game, where I partnered up with another game maker YouTuber, MightyJaw. Our game started off simple, with just some shapes and the core mechanic. Over the course of the jam, the game itself kept evolving, where we gradually added art, sounds, music and juicy effects. Just check out these awesome particle effects that MightyJaw came up with. This also got me thinking of a video I'd watched some time ago on adding juice to games to make it more fun to play. It demonstrated what a game felt like to play without juice, and later where juice was turned up to the max. You can see what a difference it makes. I thought the idea of gradually turning up juice could be made into a game mechanic and fit the theme of evolution quite well, with game feel evolving over time. I too went with the blockout clone, as I saw lots of potential areas to add juice, but was careful not to simply rip off the effects they had in this video. I started with the basic movement mechanic, where I manually placed the blocks at the top, added a moving paddle with simple left and right movement, and a bouncing ball. I scripted the ball so it would bounce off the blocks and side boundaries at the same angle as it hit it, but would bounce at an angle relative to where it hit it on the paddle. That way the player could better guide the ball, as in the original Breakout game. That was pretty much all to the in-game physics. As part of following the theme of evolution, the game would start with simple shapes to represent the blocks, paddle and ball as you see here. Basically how video games used to look like in the 70s. The game objects would later morph into actual sprites, so I drew some up in A-Sprite. I then added a couple of extra block types. First were these cannon blocks that shoot projectiles in the direction of the player. If it hits, it stuns the paddle and causes it to dramatically slow down and make it more difficult to prevent the ball from hitting the bottom of the playfield and then losing the game. The other type of block will spawn power-ups and juice upgrades after you destroy it with the ball. Next on to the first juice effect I added was a stretch and explode to the blocks when they got hit by the ball. The direction of the stretch was in relation to the side it gets hit. I also added some particles using a smaller simplified version of the sprite from the block. Next I worked on the side boundary. The laser effect of the boundary was based on code that MightyJaw had come up with in our last game. It gives off a slight flicker selling the laser effect. For juiciness, I made the laser pulse when getting hit by the ball. I found seeing the whole line expand when the ball hits gives the bounce a nice impact. Another effect that I borrowed from MightyJaw in our last project was these flying stars. As the background in the base game was quite plain, I thought the moving stars would bring it to life and give it more of a spaceship feel to match the spaceship-like objects in the game. Next I added a trail for the moving ball, which I think is pretty standard for games these days. After that was implementing particles to the side of the paddle, giving the effect that the paddle was travelling along the laser and showing a trail behind it. Next was adding knockback to the ship along with a bit of squash and stretch, making the ball impacts a bit bouncier. Now of course, when we talk about juice we need to have screen shake, and this was added as an effect for whenever the ball had a collision with any other item. Finally, the last visual effect was backflash to go with the blocks exploding. Next was onto sound effects. For this I used VFXR, which is a pretty well known tool for creating your own sound effects. I generated this generic sounding beep, which I could use for all bounce effects at the start of the game. Then I came up with unique collision sounds for everything else that would start to kick in as the game evolved during gameplay. After this, I was on to upgrades, as I wanted the paddle's abilities to evolve as you played the game. First couple of upgrades was making the ship wider. I called this upgrade Thick, which I thought was really clever. Pretty sure no other dev has used that term to describe their objects in a game yet. Hopefully it catches on. Another upgrade, which I call Ball Assist, slows down the ball just before it reaches the bottom of the playfield to give the player a bit more time to get the paddle to it. I also think it gives a nice springy impact to the ball as it immediately accelerates upward after it bounces off the paddle. I also added a shield to protect the player from the cannon projectiles. The shield will also play a large part in the next upgrade, which is autopilot. Having a shield meant that writing the logic for autopilot was kept pretty simple. I just needed to have the paddle follow the horizontal location of the ball. Without the shield, I would have had to come up with additional logic so the paddle would know how to avoid the cannon projectiles. I also think having the autopilot at the end of the game is another way that the game evolves. The player plays the game until the game doesn't need the player anymore and takes over. There's a deep message in there. The game will then continue to play itself until the window is closed. As the last few steps, I came up with the name Evo Blocks, designed the title logo, developed the basic title screen, made some last minor fixes and had a completed game. And yeah, that was my experience making a game for Xanderjam 3. So far, feedback has been pretty good, so I'm definitely pleased with how the game turned out. I've posted a link to my game and all other submitted games in the video description. Please check them out. There are some really interesting takes on the theme. Well, that's all from me, and I'll see you next time.